Sometimes the smallest dollar carries the biggest decision of your life. The soft clink of a single-dollar bill sliding across the worn convenience store counter barely rose above the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the distant buzz of refrigerators filled with cold drinks. The scanner beeped as customers came and went, their conversations blending into the ordinary rhythm of another Tuesday evening in a small American town. Olivia Hayes stood quietly at the register, her faded denim jacket hanging loosely over a simple sweater that had seen too many winters. A nearly empty shopping basket rested beside her feet. Inside lay a loaf of discounted bread, a carton of milk, a can of tomato soup, and a small bottle of generic children's cough medicine. She had already returned 2 other items to the shelf after realizing she could not afford them. Her 5-year-old daughter, Grace, waited patiently beside the entrance wearing a pink backpack almost as large as she was, coloring on the back of an old grocery receipt with a short blue crayon she always carried in her pocket. Olivia slowly opened her worn wallet. A pharmacy receipt, 2 faded family photographs, and 1 single-dollar bill remained inside. That was everything. Payday was still 2 days away. Rent had already been negotiated for 1 more week. The medicine for Grace's lingering cough could not wait. Olivia paid for the bread, milk, soup, and medicine, watching the cash register display leave exactly $1 in change. She stared at the bill resting in her hand for several quiet seconds. The lottery display beside the register caught her eye. She had never been someone who believed luck solved problems. Every dollar usually had a destination before she even earned it. Yet something about the weight of endless exhaustion whispered that perhaps hope sometimes arrived in unexpected ways. "1 scratch ticket, please," she said softly. The cashier looked surprised, but nodded kindly before reaching toward the display behind him. Just as the ticket touched Olivia's fingertips, a calm male voice spoke from directly behind her. "Excuse me," the man said. "That one is mine." The words seemed to stop the entire store. The cashier froze with his hand still resting on the counter. A customer waiting near the coffee station slowly turned around. Even Grace looked up from her drawing. Olivia blinked in confusion before turning toward the stranger. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing dark jeans, a charcoal jacket, and carrying only a bottle of water and a newspaper beneath one arm. His neatly trimmed dark brown hair carried faint traces of silver near his temples, and his calm blue eyes showed no anger, only quiet certainty. "I am sorry," Olivia replied immediately, gently holding the ticket toward him. "I did not know." The man looked at the ticket, then back at the cashier. "I asked him to hold that exact ticket for me while I stepped outside to answer a phone call." The cashier's expression filled with embarrassment. "You are right, sir. I completely forgot after the delivery truck arrived." Olivia did not hesitate. She extended the ticket toward the stranger with both hands. "Then it belongs to you." The man studied her face for a long moment before looking down at the single dollar still resting between her fingers. His eyes briefly drifted toward the nearly empty shopping bag, then toward Grace quietly waiting by the door with a tired but hopeful smile. Something in his expression changed almost imperceptibly. He slowly shook his head. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but I think we should find out who it really belongs to first." The cashier looked uncertain as he glanced between Olivia and the stranger. "I truly am sorry," he said. "He asked me to set this particular ticket aside a few minutes ago, but everything became busy and I handed it to the next customer without thinking." Olivia immediately placed the ticket back on the counter. "Then there is nothing to discuss," she replied quietly. "It belongs to him." She reached for the single dollar still lying beside the register, intending to take it back and leave. The man gently raised one hand before she could move. "May I ask you something?" he said in the same calm voice. Olivia nodded politely. "Why did you buy a scratch ticket instead of keeping the dollar?" She hesitated for a moment, embarrassed by the question. Grace wandered closer, still clutching her little drawing, listening without fully understanding the conversation. Olivia smiled faintly before answering. "Because tomorrow I still have to find a way to pay for my daughter's school lunch account. I know a lottery ticket is not a plan. It was just one small moment where I hoped life might surprise us." She laughed softly at herself. "I suppose that sounds foolish." The man looked toward the grocery bag resting near her feet. The bread was the cheapest brand on the shelf. The milk carried a bright yellow clearance sticker. The cough medicine was generic. Nothing inside suggested waste or impulse. Everything reflected careful decisions made $1 at a time. "What is your daughter's name?" he asked. "Grace," Olivia answered. Grace smiled shyly. "Hi." The stranger smiled back. "Hello, Grace." Then he turned toward Olivia again. "If you believe the ticket belongs to me, why did you not simply walk out before I came back inside?" Olivia looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Because it would not have been mine." The answer came so naturally that she almost seemed confused anyone would ask. "I teach Grace that we keep what belongs to us and return what does not. If I break that rule because no one is watching, then the lesson means nothing." The cashier quietly lowered his eyes. A customer near the coffee station slowly folded his newspaper, listening without pretending not to. For a few seconds, the little convenience store became unusually still. The stranger studied Olivia's face carefully. He had spent decades negotiating contracts worth billions of dollars. Yet honesty this simple felt far rarer than any successful business deal. He gently pushed the ticket back across the counter. "Then perhaps we should settle the question another way," he suggested. "Scratch it." Olivia blinked. "I cannot." "Why not?" "Because if it wins, I would always wonder whether I accepted something that was never meant for me." The man smiled thoughtfully. "Fair enough." He picked up the ticket, looked at it for a moment, then placed it back onto the counter once more. "I no longer want it." Olivia frowned. "But you said." "I did." His expression softened. "And now I am choosing to give it away before anyone knows what it is worth." Olivia slowly shook her head. "I cannot accept gifts from strangers." Grace tugged gently on her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "maybe he just wants somebody nice to have it." The stranger looked down at the little girl and smiled again before turning toward the cashier. "There is an easy solution," he said quietly. "You sold the ticket to her. Let the ticket decide where it belongs." The cashier nodded nervously and slid a small silver coin across the counter. Every eye inside the store settled on the untouched ticket resting beneath the bright fluorescent lights while Olivia stared at it, wondering how one ordinary dollar had suddenly become the most difficult decision of her life. Olivia looked at the small silver coin resting beside the scratched ticket as though it carried far more weight than metal ever should. Around her, the convenience store seemed unusually quiet. Even the steady hum of the refrigerators faded beneath the silence that had settled over everyone watching. Grace slipped her tiny hand into her mother's and whispered, "It is okay, Mom." Olivia managed a faint smile before picking up the coin. Her fingers trembled slightly, not because she expected to win anything, but because she still felt uncertain whether she should even scratch the ticket. The stranger nodded gently. "Whatever happens next," he said, "the answer will belong to the truth." Olivia slowly pressed the edge of the coin against the silver coating. The first line disappeared with a soft scraping sound. Then another. Tiny metallic flakes gathered on the counter, while every pair of eyes remained fixed on the ticket. The cashier unconsciously leaned forward. A truck driver waiting near the coffee machine quietly removed his baseball cap. Grace stood on her tiptoes trying to see over the counter. Olivia revealed the final symbol and stopped moving. She stared at the ticket for several long seconds without speaking. "Did I read that correctly?" she whispered almost to herself. The cashier gently took the ticket, adjusted his glasses, and looked twice before his eyes widened. "Ma'am," his voice caught for a moment, "this ticket is a winner." Several customers smiled immediately, while Grace clapped her hands without understanding what the announcement truly meant. The cashier quickly scanned the validation barcode through the lottery terminal. The machine beeped once before displaying the official amount. His mouth slowly fell open. It is worth $50,000. The number seemed to freeze the room. Grace looked at her mother with bright, hopeful eyes. Olivia remained completely still. $50,000 could erase months of fear. It could pay overdue rent, clear medical bills, replace the aging car that barely started each morning, and allow Grace to sleep without hearing whispered conversations about money after bedtime. Yet instead of reaching for the ticket, Olivia quietly turned toward the stranger and held it out with both hands. "It is yours," she said softly. The cashier blinked in disbelief. "Ma'am, you bought the ticket." Olivia shook her head. "He asked for that exact ticket before I arrived. I only received it because of an honest mistake. I cannot build my daughter's future on something that was never truly meant for us." Grace looked up at her mother, then toward the stranger. "Mom always says the right thing is still the right thing, even when it hurts." The stranger stared silently at the ticket for several moments before looking back at Olivia. His expression had changed completely. The curiosity that first appeared inside the store had become something much deeper. He had spent years surrounded by people willing to fight over percentages, contracts, and opportunities worth millions. Standing before him now was a woman willing to walk away from $50,000 simply because her conscience mattered more than comfort. He slowly folded Olivia's fingers back around the ticket. "No," he said quietly. "I claimed it before I knew who deserved it. Now I do." Olivia immediately tried to protest. "Please." He gently shook his head. "The ticket may have caught my attention, but your honesty earned my respect." The cashier looked between them, uncertain what to say. Finally, he smiled. "Legally, the ticket belongs to the customer who purchased it." Olivia lowered her eyes. The stranger's words continued echoing quietly in her thoughts. For the first time in many years, she realized that the greatest prize inside the store might not have been hidden beneath silver coating at all. Someone she had never met had just seen something inside her that no amount of money could ever buy. The cashier carefully placed the winning ticket inside a protective envelope before handing it back to Olivia with both hands. As though he understood, he was holding something far more valuable than paper. Several customers quietly congratulated her before leaving the store one by one. But Olivia remained standing beside the counter, still unable to believe everything that had happened within a few extraordinary minutes. $50,000 could change almost every problem waiting for her at home, yet the number that echoed inside her mind was not the prize. It was the stranger's simple sentence. "Your honesty earned my respect." Grace gently slipped her small hand into her mother's again. "Can we go home now?" she asked softly. Olivia smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart." As she reached for the grocery bag, the stranger picked up his bottle of water and newspaper. "Allow me to carry that for you," he offered politely. Olivia hesitated for a moment before shaking her head with a grateful smile. "Thank you, but I can manage." He nodded with quiet understanding. "I thought you might say that." Together they walked toward the parking lot beneath the cool evening sky. Grace skipped happily between them, still humming to herself without realizing how dramatically the day had changed. Near Olivia's aging sedan, whose faded paint and cracked rear bumper reflected years of careful survival, Grace suddenly began coughing. Olivia immediately knelt beside her daughter, gently helping her sip water from a small reusable bottle she carried everywhere. The stranger watched silently, noticing how naturally Olivia placed her daughter's comfort before everything else. Once Grace felt better, Olivia looked up with an apologetic smile. "She has been fighting this cough for almost 2 weeks. The medicine should help." The stranger glanced toward the grocery bag where the inexpensive bottle of children's medicine rested beside the bread and soup. Nothing inside suggested celebration after winning a prize. Everything still reflected careful responsibility. "I hope she feels better soon," he said sincerely. Olivia thanked him before opening the driver's door. Just before she climbed inside, the stranger reached into his jacket pocket and removed a simple business card. "If you ever need someone to verify today's lottery paperwork or answer questions about the prize process, my assistant can help." Olivia accepted the card politely without looking at it. "Thank you." She placed it inside her wallet beside the pharmacy receipt and family photographs, assuming it belonged to an accountant or attorney familiar with lottery claims. The stranger smiled one last time. "Take good care of Grace." "I always will," Olivia replied without hesitation. He watched the old sedan slowly pull out of the parking lot before returning to his own vehicle several spaces away. Sitting behind the steering wheel, Daniel Carter remained still for a long moment. He had originally wanted nothing more than the scratch ticket he believed had been set aside for him. Instead, he had encountered something infinitely rarer than good fortune. He had met a woman who chose integrity over desperation even when life had given her every reason to compromise. Meanwhile, Olivia drove quietly through familiar streets toward the small apartment she rented month to month. Grace eventually fell asleep against the passenger window, clutching the grocery receipt on which she had finished drawing a little house with flowers beneath every window. At a red light, Olivia finally remembered the business card tucked inside her wallet. She pulled it out, expecting to see the name of a financial advisor. Instead, silver lettering reflected beneath the dashboard lights. "Daniel Carter, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Carter Capital Group." Olivia stared at the card in complete silence as the traffic light turned green behind her. She had just spent nearly an hour speaking honestly with one of the most recognizable business leaders in the country without ever knowing who he truly was, and somehow she sensed their unexpected story was only beginning. The following morning, Olivia sat at the small kitchen table while early sunlight filtered through the apartment blinds, illuminating the winning lottery ticket resting beside a cup of untouched coffee. Grace happily ate a bowl of cereal, completely unaware that one ordinary evening had quietly changed the future waiting beyond their front door. Olivia had already contacted the state lottery office, completed the first verification steps, and carefully placed the ticket inside a protective envelope exactly as instructed. Even after hearing the official confirmation, the prize still felt strangely unreal. What occupied her thoughts far more than the money was the business card lying beside the ticket. Daniel Carter, founder and chief executive officer, Carter Capital Group. She searched his name online and discovered articles describing one of the country's most respected investment firms, photographs from charity events, and interviews discussing affordable housing and educational foundations. She stared at the screen in disbelief. The man who had patiently spoken with her inside a small convenience store was someone whose decisions influenced thousands of lives every day. She quietly slipped the business card back into her wallet, uncertain whether she should ever use it. 2 days later, after depositing the initial lottery documents and paying overdue utility bills that had kept her awake for weeks, Olivia visited Grace's elementary school to settle the unpaid lunch account she had worried about for months. As she left the school office, she noticed a community bulletin board filled with flyers for local events. One announcement immediately caught her attention: Carter Community Foundation Family Resource Fair, employment opportunities, financial planning, housing assistance, children's activities. Saturday, 10 o'clock. Olivia read the flyer twice before smiling quietly. Perhaps attending would simply be a way to say thank you in person. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies and cool autumn air. Families filled the community center parking lot, while volunteers welcomed children with balloons, coloring books, and science demonstrations. Grace eagerly ran toward a craft table where volunteers helped children decorate wooden birdhouses. Olivia remained nearby, admiring the kindness surrounding the event. There were no luxury displays or expensive banners. Everything focused on helping ordinary families build stronger futures. Across the room, Daniel stood wearing simple jeans, a navy sweater, and comfortable walking shoes instead of the tailored suits that usually accompanied public appearances. He preferred meeting people as naturally as possible during community events, allowing conversations to begin without titles standing between them. While helping volunteers unload boxes of children's books, he glanced toward the entrance and immediately recognized Olivia. She hesitated for only a second before walking over with a warm smile. "I believe this belongs to you," she joked softly, holding up the business card he had given her. Daniel laughed quietly. "I was beginning to wonder whether you had thrown it away." Olivia shook her head. "I almost did, because I thought I would never have a reason to call someone like you." Daniel smiled thoughtfully. "And yet here you are." Before either could continue, a volunteer accidentally dropped a large box filled with children's books across the floor. Without hesitation, Olivia knelt beside several children already gathering scattered books, laughing with them as they stacked each title neatly back into the box. She thanked every child for helping before carrying the box toward the reading corner herself. Daniel watched silently from only a few feet away. Once again, she had chosen service before conversation, helping strangers before asking for anything in return. When she returned, slightly out of breath, Daniel smiled with quiet admiration. "You always seem to notice the people who need help before anyone else does." Olivia shrugged gently. "Someone noticed me when I needed it most. I suppose that changes the way you see the world." Daniel looked toward Grace, happily reading a picture book with other children beneath a colorful mural. Then he looked back at Olivia with an expression that suggested a new idea had quietly taken shape. For the second time since they met, he realized the greatest opportunity standing before him had never been hidden beneath a lottery ticket. It had been standing beside it all along. Monday morning arrived with a quiet sense of purpose neither Olivia nor Daniel had expected only a week earlier. While Grace happily left for school carrying a new lunchbox and a smile that no longer hid quiet worries, Olivia drove across town to the Carter Community Foundation after receiving an unexpected invitation from Daniel's assistant. The message had been simple. Mr. Carter would appreciate the opportunity to discuss an idea with you. She almost declined. Winning the lottery had already changed enough. She did not want anyone believing she expected special treatment because of one fortunate moment. Even so, curiosity gently outweighed hesitation. The foundation occupied a bright building filled with sunlight, children's artwork, and photographs of families celebrating new beginnings instead of expensive decorations or displays of wealth. Volunteers greeted every visitor by name whenever possible, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a neighborhood center than a corporate office. Daniel welcomed Olivia personally in a modest meeting room overlooking a small community garden where children were planting flowers. There were no executives waiting beside him, no photographers, and no formal presentation. Only 2 cups of coffee, a notebook, and a conversation. "Thank you for coming," he said warmly. Olivia smiled. "I still do not understand why you wanted to meet with me." Daniel folded his hands thoughtfully. "Because I have spent years funding programs designed to help families, but last week I realized something important. Resources matter. Experience matters more. The people we serve deserve guidance from someone who truly understands what it feels like to count every dollar and still choose honesty." Olivia listened quietly. Daniel continued. "The lottery changed your financial situation, but it did not change your character. That is the part one cannot teach." He gently slid a folder across the table. Inside was an invitation to join the Carter Community Foundation as a community family advisor, a flexible position focused on mentoring struggling parents, organizing local outreach events, and helping families connect with housing, employment, and educational opportunities. The salary was fair, the schedule allowed time with grace, and complete training was included. Olivia looked up in surprise. "You are offering me a job?" Daniel smiled. "I am offering you an opportunity to do what you were already doing naturally." Every person I spoke with after the convenience store described the same woman. The mother who returned a lottery ticket she believed belonged to someone else. The volunteer who always noticed the quiet child standing alone. The customer who thanked every cashier by name. Those things cannot be written into a job description, but they can change lives. Olivia lowered her eyes toward the folder. She remembered every night spent worrying whether Grace would notice the empty refrigerator before breakfast. She remembered calculating grocery totals down to the last dollar. She remembered believing survival was the only goal. Now someone was asking her to transform those painful memories into hope for other families. "I do not have impressive qualifications," she admitted softly. Daniel shook his head. "You have something far rarer. People trust someone who has already walked the road they are trying to survive." Olivia smiled through grateful tears. "Then I will do everything I can to deserve that trust." Daniel extended his hand. "That is exactly why I hoped you would say yes." Outside the meeting room, Grace finished planting a small sunflower beside other children in the foundation garden. She proudly brushed the dirt from her hands and looked through the window just as her mother shook Daniel's hand. Neither of them realized the greatest gift created by a $1 lottery ticket had never been the money itself. It was the chance for one honest choice to become the beginning of countless second chances for families who still believed nobody saw them. The weeks that followed transformed Olivia's daily routine in ways she had never imagined. Yet the greatest changes had nothing to do with the lottery money resting safely in her savings account. Every morning she arrived at the Carter Community Foundation before the doors opened, arranging resource packets, reviewing housing applications, and preparing welcome folders for families facing the same uncertainty she had once carried alone. She quickly discovered that people rarely remembered statistics or brochures. They remembered the person who looked them in the eyes and quietly said, "I understand." Olivia never began conversations by mentioning the lottery ticket. Instead, she spoke about perseverance, budgeting, community resources, and the importance of accepting help without feeling ashamed. Parents listened because her words carried experience instead of theory. Grace loved visiting the foundation after school. She often sat in the children's reading corner coloring beside other young visitors, while volunteers helped parents complete paperwork. One afternoon, a nervous mother arrived carrying a toddler on one hip and a folder filled with overdue notices in the other hand. Tears threatened to spill as she apologized repeatedly for asking so many questions. Before any volunteer could respond, Olivia walked over with a gentle smile and offered her a cup of coffee. "You do not have to apologize for trying to take care of your family," she said softly. The young mother exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Daniel happened to witness the exchange while walking through the lobby after a meeting with several board members. He noticed that Olivia never rushed anyone, never interrupted, and never treated another person's hardship as a problem to solve quickly. She treated every family as though they still possessed something valuable, even when they no longer believed it themselves. Later that afternoon, Daniel invited Olivia into his office. Large windows overlooked the city skyline, but his attention remained fixed on the community center below, where families came and went carrying folders instead of fear. "Do you know what has changed since you started here?" he asked. Olivia smiled uncertainly. "I hope we have been able to help more families." Daniel nodded. "Applications are increasing because people trust this place more than ever before. Not because of our funding, because they trust you." Olivia looked genuinely surprised. "I am only doing my job." Daniel quietly shook his head. "No, you are reminding people they still have dignity. There is a difference." He handed her a report showing rising participation in community programs, improved housing placement rates, and dozens of handwritten letters from families thanking the foundation. Many mentioned Olivia by name. One note simply read, "She believed in us before we believed in ourselves." Olivia carefully folded the letter and held it for a moment without speaking. "I never imagined my hardest season would become the thing that helped someone else survive theirs," she whispered. Daniel smiled warmly. "That is often how healing works." As the workday ended, Grace proudly ran into the office carrying a drawing she had finished in the children's room. It showed a little convenience store, a smiling cashier, a tiny lottery ticket, and two strangers standing beside one another. Above the picture she had written in colorful letters, $1 can find a friend. Daniel laughed softly before placing the drawing on a shelf behind his desk. "Would you mind if I keep this?" Grace beamed with pride. Olivia looked at the picture, then at Daniel, realizing the little girl had understood something that adults often overlooked. The lottery ticket had opened a door, but it was honesty that had invited them both to walk through it. Neither of them realized another opportunity was quietly waiting just beyond that doorway, one that would change far more lives than either of them could yet imagine. Spring arrived quietly, bringing longer days and fresh green leaves to the city that had once felt so heavy to Olivia. The lottery money had been managed carefully with the help of trusted financial advisors recommended by the state lottery office. After paying outstanding medical bills, creating a college savings account for Grace, and setting aside an emergency fund, Olivia made a decision that surprised everyone except Daniel. She refused to let the remaining money become a reason to stop working. Instead, she believed it should become a tool that allowed her to serve with even greater purpose. The Carter Community Foundation slowly expanded several of its family assistance programs under Daniel's leadership, and Olivia became one of the most trusted voices guiding parents through difficult seasons. She organized budgeting workshops, connected families with housing counselors, and often stayed long after office hours simply because another mother needed someone willing to listen. One afternoon, a father arrived carrying a sleeping toddler, while quietly admitting he had lost both his apartment and his confidence within the same month. Olivia invited him to sit down before opening any paperwork. "Tell me what happened," she said gently. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. When the father finally left with practical resources, temporary housing, and renewed determination, he quietly stopped at the reception desk. "For the first time in months," he whispered, "someone treated me like I still mattered." Daniel happened to hear those words while walking through the lobby. He looked toward Olivia, who had already welcomed the next family with the same patient smile she offered everyone. Later that week, the foundation board gathered for its quarterly meeting. Several executives presented financial reports and expansion proposals before Daniel stood to address the room. "1 year ago," he began, "our organization measured success by the number of grants we distributed. Today we measure success by the number of families who leave believing in themselves again." He turned toward Olivia, who sat quietly near the end of the conference table. "That change began because one person reminded all of us that dignity should never be separated from assistance." The room responded with warm applause. Olivia felt her face grow warm with embarrassment and gratitude. She had never sought recognition. She had simply tried to offer other families what she herself had once needed most. After the meeting, Daniel caught up with her outside beneath a row of flowering trees surrounding the foundation courtyard. Grace played nearby with several children, while volunteers prepared raised garden beds for a spring community event. Daniel handed Olivia a small envelope. Inside was not another employment contract or financial document. It contained architectural drawings for a new family resource center scheduled to open the following year. Across the front page, one program title immediately caught Olivia's attention: The Last Dollar Initiative. She looked up in surprise. Daniel smiled. Every family deserves one more chance before hope runs out. This program will provide emergency grocery assistance, school lunch support, medicine vouchers, and financial counseling before parents ever reach a crisis. Olivia slowly traced the program name with her fingertips. You named it after that evening. Daniel nodded. Not after the ticket. After the decision you made while holding only $1. That moment reminded me the greatest investment is not in money. It is in people whose character remains strong even when life becomes difficult. Grace ran toward them carrying a small sunflower she had just planted in the community garden. Look, she said proudly. It is going to help make this place beautiful. Olivia smiled and gently tucked the flower into the fresh soil beside dozens of others. She realized the foundation was becoming much like that garden. Every act of kindness planted quietly today would continue growing long after the people who planted it had gone home, and she silently hoped every family who walked through those doors would one day discover what she herself had learned. Sometimes the greatest blessing does not arrive as unexpected money. Sometimes it arrives as someone who believes your honesty is worth building a future around. 1 year later, the small convenience store looked almost exactly the same. The fluorescent lights still hummed softly above the checkout counter. The coffee machine still released the familiar aroma that greeted customers every morning. The lottery display still stood beside the register where countless people paused for only a few seconds before continuing with their day. Yet for Olivia Hayes, the little store had become a quiet reminder that ordinary places sometimes hold extraordinary turning points. She stopped there on her way to the Carter Community Foundation after dropping Grace off at school. Grace was now healthier, happier, and proudly carried a backpack filled with library books instead of medicine bottles. Olivia walked through the familiar aisles with a small basket containing milk, bread, and fruit before approaching the same register where everything had begun. As she waited in line, a young mother entered carrying a tired little boy on one hip while searching anxiously through her wallet. She quietly counted a few dollar bills and several coins before placing a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and children's medicine on the counter. When the cashier announced the total, she froze. She was exactly $1 short. Embarrassment filled her face as she reached for the medicine, preparing to place it back on the shelf. Olivia looked at the scene for only a moment before gently stepping forward. Without saying a word, she placed a single $1 bill on the counter. The young mother immediately turned with grateful eyes. "I cannot let you do that," she whispered. Olivia smiled warmly. "Someone once reminded me that $1 can change much more than a receipt." The cashier quietly accepted the bill and completed the purchase. The young mother's eyes filled with tears as she thanked Olivia again and again before leaving the store, holding her son's hand a little more confidently than when she had entered. Olivia watched them disappear through the glass doors before purchasing her own groceries. As she gathered her bag, the cashier smiled with quiet recognition. "I remember you," he said softly. "You are the woman with the lottery ticket." Olivia laughed gently. "I hope one day people remember me for something else." The cashier looked toward the door where the young mother had just left. "I think they already will." Outside, a familiar black sedan was parked beneath the shade of a large maple tree. Daniel leaned casually against the driver's door after stopping by the neighborhood to visit one of the foundation's newest community programs. He had quietly witnessed the entire exchange through the front windows of the store. Olivia noticed him and smiled as she walked over carrying her grocery bag. "You planned this?" she asked playfully. Daniel laughed. "Not this time." They stood together for a moment watching families come and go beneath the warm afternoon sun. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that cashier had remembered your ticket?" Olivia asked quietly. Daniel looked toward the convenience store entrance before answering. "Sometimes. Then I remember that the ticket was never the miracle." Olivia nodded with a thoughtful smile. The miracle was being reminded that honesty still matters. Daniel looked at her with the same quiet respect he had felt from the very beginning. And because of one honest decision, thousands of families have already received help through the Last Dollar initiative. $1 became school lunches, medicine vouchers, emergency groceries, and new beginnings. Olivia slipped her hands into her jacket pockets as a gentle breeze carried autumn leaves across the parking lot. She realized the lottery money had changed her circumstances, but honesty had changed her purpose. Grace ran toward them after school carrying a handmade picture from class. Across the top, she had written in colorful letters, "Kindness is worth more than winning." Daniel smiled as he looked at the drawing, then back at the little convenience store where everything had started. Neither of them had found what they were searching for that evening long ago. Olivia had not found easy answers, and Daniel had not found the lottery ticket he believed was his. Instead, they had discovered something infinitely more valuable. Because money can change a season of life, but character can change generations. And sometimes the greatest fortune begins with the smallest dollar honestly given away.